Airports were a second home to Laura Bennett, a 32-year-old security guard who had spent nearly a decade at her post. Day after day, she checked bags, scanned IDs, and enforced safety rules with quiet precision. To most travelers, she blended into the background, just another uniform in a sea of hurried passengers. But Laura never treated her job as routine. For her, it wasn't merely about enforcing regulations, it was about protecting lives. That morning, however, carried a strange electricity. Whispers rippled through the terminal. President Donald Trump was expected to pass through the airport. Security tightened. Staff moved with nervous urgency. Laura, stationed at her checkpoint, reminded herself of the principle she lived by: rules apply to everyone, no exceptions. The low hum of travelers gave way to an excited buzz when the presidential motorcade arrived. Secret Service agents scanned every corner, their presence commanding silence. Then came the man himself. Trump, in his signature red tie, strode calmly through the terminal, greeting staff with nods and polite smiles. Cameras flashed. Gasps followed. Yet when he approached Laura's station, she stood firm. "Sir, I'll need your ID and boarding pass," she said evenly, extending her hand. The crowd seemed to hold its breath. A lone airport guard was stopping the President of the United States. Trump chuckled softly and produced his documents. But Laura's sharp eyes noticed something. His carry-on bag had not been scanned. "Sir," she continued, her voice steady, "that bag needs to go through the scanner." A ripple of shock moved through the room. Secret Service agents exchanged tense glances. One stepped forward. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is the President's bag. It's already been cleared." Laura's palms tingled with nerves, but she held her ground. "I understand," she replied, "but it hasn't gone through my scanner. My duty is the same for everyone." Trump studied her with a look of mild amusement rather than irritation. Finally, he raised a hand to his agents. "Let her do her job," he said. "Rules are rules, aren't they?" The agents hesitated, then stepped back. Laura carefully placed the bag on the conveyor belt. The scanner whirred to life. Blue light flickering across the screen. Her heartbeat quickened as she noticed an odd shape inside a small metallic box. Her radio crackled. "Bennett, what's the delay?" her supervisor demanded. "Unidentified item in carry-on," she replied, eyes locked on the monitor. Requesting further inspection. The terminal grew tense and quiet. Trump leaned slightly closer and murmured, "You've got guts. Most people wouldn't have questioned me." Laura met his gaze. "Most people aren't responsible for an entire terminal's safety, sir." With careful hands, she opened the bag and removed the box. Secret Service agents shifted nervously. Trump gave a slight nod of reassurance. Inside the box were handwritten letters, tied together with a simple ribbon, some yellowed with age, others stained by smudged ink. "What are these?" Laura asked softly. Trump's expression turned unexpectedly solemn. "Letters from veterans and families of soldiers," he explained. "Some I've answered, some I haven't. I read them when I travel. They mean more to me than anything else I carry." Laura gently examined the top envelope. Addressed simply to Mr. President from a grieving mother. Her throat tightened. Around them, the once curious crowd fell silent. This was not contraband. This was something profoundly human. Trump continued quietly, "I don't like putting them in checked luggage. Too risky." Laura carefully returned the letters. "I understand, sir, but I had to be sure." Trump gave a small nod. "And you were right. Never apologize for doing your duty." As the agents reclaimed the bag, Trump surprised everyone by selecting a single envelope from the stack. He opened it and began to read aloud in a voice softer than anyone expected. "Dear Mr. President, my husband never came back from his last deployment. He believed he was fighting for a country that cared. I struggle every day to explain to our children why he isn't here. I don't want money. I don't want recognition. I just want to believe his sacrifice mattered." The words hung heavy in the air. Laura felt a lump in her throat. She had seen families in mourning before, but hearing such raw pain spoken aloud gave it a weight she couldn't shake. "These letters remind me," Trump said quietly, "that every policy and decision affects real people. Leaders forget that sometimes." Laura replied with quiet conviction, "And every person matters no matter their status. That's why I couldn't just wave you through." Trump's eyes softened. "You're right, maybe I needed this reminder today." Turning to the gathered crowd, he raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, this guard showed what true duty looks like. She stopped me, the president, because safety comes first." The terminal erupted into applause. Cameras flashed. Laura, who never sought attention, suddenly found herself the center of a viral moment as the cheers subsided. Laura's supervisor hurried forward, pale and anxious. "Laura, you can't just delay the president," Trump interrupted with a slight smile. "She didn't delay me, she did her job, and if I were late, it would still be worth it." Before departing, Trump asked her name. "Laura Bennett," she replied. "Laura," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. "I'll remember that." Just as he began to leave, an elderly woman in the crowd pushed forward, clutching a worn letter. "Mr. President," she called, her voice trembling, "please, I've been trying to get this to you for years. They never let me." Trump motioned for her to come closer. Her hands shook as she offered the letter. "It's from my son," she whispered. He wrote it before. Before he passed, Trump accepted it gently and unfolded the paper. The handwriting inside was hurried but strong. Dear Mom, if you're reading this, I didn't make it home. Don't cry for me. I believe in the country I served, and I believe in you. Please live your life fully. Tell people to care for each other. That's all that matters. The woman broke down in tears. Trump rested a steady hand on her shoulder. Your son was brave, he said softly. His words remind us that sacrifice means nothing if we don't live with compassion. Laura watched in silence, realizing that a simple act of doing her job had opened the door to a moment far larger than herself, a reminder of humanity, duty, and the quiet courage found in unexpected places. Laura swallowed hard, a lump forming in her throat as she watched the grieving mother. She couldn't help but see her own family reflected in the woman's pain. Her brother had served overseas too, though he'd come home alive. The fear of losing him had haunted her family for years. President Trump carefully folded the letter and returned it to its envelope. Thank you for sharing this with me, he said softly. I'll carry it with the others. The woman clutched his hand and whispered, please, don't let his words be forgotten. Trump nodded, his face solemn. In that quiet moment, Laura felt the weight of what had just unfolded. Her simple decision to enforce the rules of routine bag check had opened a door for stories long hidden in silence to finally be heard. It felt almost as if fate had placed her at that checkpoint for this very reason. The crowd, once skeptical and impatient, now stood in hushed reverence. Cell phones were lowered. Eyes glistened. Even the weary travelers who moments ago only cared about boarding their flights sensed they had witnessed something sacred. Laura overheard fragments of whispers. He read it aloud. That guard stood her ground. Did you see the look on that woman's face? Her supervisor leaned close, voice sharp but low. Laura, this is above your pay grade. Let them handle it. But Laura shook her head slightly. She hadn't meant to interfere. She had simply done her job. Somehow, it had become something far greater. Trump's voice rose again, carrying across the terminal. Every day, people like Laura make sure the rules are followed, fairly equally, without favoritism. That is real integrity. And every day, families like this mother carry burdens most of us cannot imagine. That is real strength. The applause that followed was softer this time, but deeper, more heartfelt. Heat rose to Laura's cheeks. Praise was unfamiliar territory. She was just a woman in a uniform. A single mother raising her daughter after a painful divorce, working long shifts to keep the bills paid. And yet here she was, being held up by the president himself as an example of duty and courage. Before she could process the sudden attention, another figure stepped forward. A young man in his 20s, his hands trembling as he clutched a worn photograph. His voice wavered. Mr. President, may I show you something too? Laura's chest tightened. The ripple effect of her decision was still spreading. The young man held out the photo with shaking hands. Trump accepted it carefully. The image showed a smiling soldier in uniform, his arm draped around a younger brother. That's my brother, Anthony, the young man said, his voice cracking. He never came home. I was 12 when he died. I promised I'd keep his memory alive. But sometimes, it feels like the world has forgotten him. Trump studied the photograph for a long moment, then placed a steady hand on the young man's shoulder. Anthony isn't forgotten, he said firmly. Not today. Not ever. You've kept your promise. The young man's eyes filled with tears as quiet murmurs of support spread through the crowd. Laura felt her own throat tighten. She thought of her 7-year-old daughter, Sophie. What if Sophie grew up with only a photograph to remember her by? The thought made her grip the edge of her podium to steady herself. Trump returned the photo and said gently, carry this with you. Let it remind you that sacrifice gives meaning to our freedom, something no one can erase. The young man clutched the photo to his chest as though it were life itself. Laura stood stunned. A routine security check had turned into a gathering of shared grief and silent resilience. The checkpoint felt less like an airport gate and more like a confessional where truth, loss, and hope collided. Then, almost without realizing it, Laura felt words rising in her chest. Her hands trembled, but she spoke. Sir, she began quietly, may I share something personal? Trump turned back, his expression warm. Go ahead. The terminal fell silent again. Laura drew a deep breath. My brother, Mark, served in Afghanistan. He came back alive, but not the same. He struggles with PTSD. Some days he can't even leave the house. I try to help, but I don't always know how. Sometimes I wonder if people like him, the ones who survive, are forgotten too. Her voice cracked. She hadn't planned to reveal so much, but the truth spilled out. Trump's eyes softened. You're right. We honor the fallen, but those who return often carry invisible wounds. That pain deserves recognition, too. Many in the crowd nodded, visibly moved. Trump reached into the box of letters and pulled one free. There's a letter here from a veteran who felt exactly what you just described, he said. Would you like me to read it? Laura nodded, tears threatening to spill. Trump unfolded the letter and began to read. I came home alive, but every night I die again in my dreams. I don't need medals. I need people to see me, not the uniform. I need them to understand that I'm still fighting inside." Laura pressed her lips together, her chest tightening. She wasn't alone. Others carried the same unseen battles her brother faced. Trump closed the letter and looked directly at her. "You're right to fight for your brother, just as you fought to uphold the rules here. Don't ever underestimate the difference you're making." That was all it took. Laura's tears finally spilled over. For once, she felt truly seen. The crowd erupted into applause once more. But this time, the cheers weren't for the president. They were for her. Then Trump did something unexpected. He selected one of the folded letters from his box and placed it gently into Laura's hand. "This one," he said softly, "is for you. Keep it. Read it whenever you feel like giving up. It helped me, and I believe it will help you too." Laura stared at the envelope, stunned. Even before opening it, she felt the weight of the words inside. The Secret Service shifted anxiously, reminding Trump of the ticking clock. But he didn't rush. Instead, he turned to the crowd one final time. "Sometimes the most important lessons don't come from those in power," he said. "They come from ordinary people who remind us what truly matters." With that, he finally headed toward his gate. Laura clutched the letter tightly, her heart pounding. She didn't yet know what it contained, but she sensed it would change her life. After Trump departed, the terminal slowly returned to motion. Travelers whispered excitedly, many approaching Laura to thank her for her courage. But their words barely registered. Her focus was fixed on the envelope in her hand. Stepping aside to a quiet corner, Laura carefully broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, its handwriting elegant and flowing. "To whoever finds this letter, life will test you. It will make you feel small, invisible, even forgotten. But remember this: your duty, no matter how ordinary it seems, can change the course of someone else's life. Do your part, even when no one is watching." Especially then, Laura gasped softly. It felt as if the letter had been written for her alone. She thought of the countless mornings she'd dragged herself to work, unseen and unappreciated, wondering if her efforts mattered. Now she knew. Every bag checked, every ID verified, every rule enforced was part of a larger fabric of trust and safety. Her role wasn't small at all. Tears blurred her vision as she folded the letter with care, vowing to keep it close. Somewhere, deep inside, she felt lighter, stronger. By the next morning, her world had transformed. A video of the encounter had gone viral overnight. Clips of Laura stopping the president, the letters being read, and the elderly woman's heartbreaking moment flooded social media. Hashtags trended across the internet. Hashtag the guard who stopped Trump. Hashtag letters at the airport. Hashtag duty and honor at first. Laura panicked, unsure how to handle the sudden attention. But as she held the letter close, she understood. This moment was never about fame. It was about reminding the world that ordinary acts of duty can spark extraordinary change. Laura never sought attention. She preferred to stay in the background, doing her work quietly and without fanfare. But as she scrolled through the growing stream of online comments about the airport incident, the fear she'd initially felt began to transform into something unexpected. What replaced her anxiety wasn't pride or vanity, it was respect. Respect for the job, for the principle of fairness, and for the quiet power of integrity. People weren't mocking her, as she feared. They were inspired. Messages poured in, not of criticism, but of admiration. "We need more Lauras in the world," one comment read. Another said, "Integrity isn't about power. It's about doing the right thing, no matter who's watching." Those words pierced her heart more deeply than she expected. Even her brother Mark, who rarely reached out and usually kept to himself, called her that afternoon. His voice was soft but steady. "Laura, I saw what you did. You made me feel seen. Thank you." Tears welled in her eyes as she held the phone. His simple acknowledgement meaning more than the thousands of likes and shares online. The ripple effect spread quickly. At the airport, coworkers who normally rushed past her paused to offer smiles, pats on the back, and words of praise. Even her supervisor, who had been openly critical of her cautious nature in the past, admitted with a sheepish grin, "You handled that situation better than I ever could have." Laura began to realize something profound. A single act of quiet courage could reach far beyond the moment it happened, touching lives she would never personally meet. But the biggest surprise was still to come. 3 days later, Laura sat at her small kitchen table, sipping coffee while her young daughter, Sophie, colored beside her. The morning was calm and ordinary until the phone rang. She nearly dropped her cup when she saw the caller ID, unknown, Washington, D.C. Heart racing. She answered cautiously. "Hello?" A formal voice responded. "Please hold for the president." Laura froze, staring at the phone as Sophie looked up with wide, curious eyes. "Mommy, who is it?" she whispered. Before Laura could answer, a familiar voice came through the line. "Laura, it's me," said President Trump. Her breath caught. "Mr. President, yes," he replied warmly. "I just wanted to thank you personally. I've been thinking about what happened at the airport. You reminded me that leadership isn't about being above the rules. It's about being accountable to them." Laura swallowed hard. "Sir, I was just doing my job. And you did it exceptionally well," Trump said. "So well, In fact, that I'd like to invite you and your daughter to the White House. There's something I want you to see." Laura's hand trembled as she clutched the phone. "The White House, U.S. Yes," he confirmed. "You gave me the courage to start something new. Come see it for yourself." Sophie's eyes sparkled with excitement. Laura knew there was only one answer. A week later, Laura and Sophie boarded a plane bound for Washington, D.C. for once. Laura wasn't the one checking IDs or waving passengers through security. She was the one being escorted past checkpoints. It felt surreal. Sophie pressed her face to the window, her voice a soft whisper of wonder. "Mommy, are we really going to the president's house?" Laura smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, we are." Asterisk upon landing, a black car awaited them, flanked by polite Secret Service agents. They drove past historic monuments and sweeping lawns until the stately White House finally came into view. Sophie gasped, clapping her small hands in delight. Inside, President Trump greeted them with a warm handshake and a genuine smile. He knelt slightly to meet Sophie's eyes. "You must be Sophie. Your mom is a very brave woman." Sophie beamed and declared proudly, "She's my hero." Laura's throat tightened at her daughter's words. The president gestured for them to follow. "Come with me. I want to show you something we've started because of what happened at that airport." They walked through gleaming hallways until they entered a large, softly lit room lined with glass display cases. Inside each case rested letters, photographs, and personal artifacts, items that told deeply human stories of sacrifice, duty, and love. "We're calling this exhibit Voices of Service," Trump explained. "These letters and stories won't stay hidden in boxes anymore. They'll be remembered and honored. Your insistence on duty reminded me that these voices deserve light." Laura stepped closer, her eyes misting as she took in the displays: a child's crayon drawing for a father who never came home, a carefully folded flag with a heartfelt note, worn journals from veterans, and even the very letter they had read aloud at the airport that day. Sophie tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, look at all the stories." Laura nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes, sweetheart, they're real people's hearts." Trump continued, "This exhibit will travel across the country to airports, schools, and town halls, so everyone can witness these sacrifices. And it all began because you reminded me that integrity starts with small actions." Laura's breath caught. Her simple decision to uphold the rules had sparked something far greater than she could have imagined. Weeks later, Laura returned to the exhibit with Mark. Her brother was hesitant, his shoulders tense, his eyes wary. "This is too much attention," he muttered. Laura gently touched his arm. "Just look, that's all I ask." Mark slowly wandered among the glass cases until he stopped at a letter, written by a veteran describing life with PTSD, the same letter Trump had read aloud at the airport. His lips trembled as he whispered, "That's me. That's exactly how I feel." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "You're not alone, Mark. Others feel it too. And now the world will know." Mark's hardened expression softened. For the first time in years, relief washed over him. He hugged Laura suddenly, his voice breaking. "Thank you. I thought no one cared." "I've always cared," Laura whispered. "I just needed a way to show you." The exhibit soon became a nationwide phenomenon. News outlets covered it extensively, sharing photos of families visiting, veterans finding comfort, and children learning the meaning of service. Letters poured in from across the country, teachers bringing students, veterans writing to thank Laura and the president for making their stories visible. Months later, Laura received another invitation to Washington. At a small ceremony, President Trump stood beside her as cameras flashed. "Sometimes change doesn't begin in the grand halls of power," he said to the crowd. "Sometimes it begins at a security checkpoint, with a woman who refuses to bend the rules." Laura Bennett reminded us all that integrity is the foundation of service. He handed her a plaque engraved with her name. Laura blushed, overwhelmed. She didn't want fame, but she understood this was never about her. It was about the people whose stories were finally being heard. That night, after returning home, Laura sat at her kitchen table while Sophie slept upstairs. She unfolded a letter she carried in her wallet, one that reminded her of the truth she had lived that day. "Your duty, no matter how ordinary it seems, can change the course of someone else's life," she whispered to herself. "I mattered. My work mattered." And for the first time, she felt a deep and lasting peace. Years passed. The traveling exhibit continued its journey, touching millions of lives. Veterans found comfort. Families found recognition. Young people learned that service and integrity still mattered in a complicated world. Laura still worked at the airport, greeting passengers and scanning bags. People often recognized her now, but she never let it change who she was. One afternoon, a nervous young recruit approached her checkpoint. "Are you the Laura Bennett, the one who stopped the president?" Laura smiled softly. "Yes, but more importantly, I'm someone who did her job." The recruit nodded, his voice filled with quiet admiration. "That inspires me." As he walked away, Laura felt a warmth in her chest. Her legacy wasn't the headlines, the White House invitation, or even the exhibit. Her legacy was the reminder that ordinary people, through honesty, courage, and doing what's right, can change the world. and she knew that her daughter, growing up in the light of that truth, would carry it forward. The story of one airport guard and one moment of integrity had rippled outward, becoming something timeless.